How's it going? This is Texans in the Lab. I'm Drew Dougherty. That's John Harris. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you, first of all. We appreciate it. Make sure you're subscribed to this Texans YouTube channel because you'll get videos like this and all the fantastic videos that our Houston Texans content team pumps out. It'll be there all the time as John pantomimes all this stuff. John, can you tilt up your camera just a little bit?
Oh, yeah. You want to see all of my white hair?
Yeah, we're going
to see all of my white hair? Is that what you're trying to, all my golden locks?
Yes, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. And then if you're listening on iTunes, please follow the Texans on iTunes so you'll regularly get this podcast. All right, John, minicamp, mandatory minicamp rolls on. The Texans on Wednesday worked a little bit outside and then they went inside. I was there for the outside portion. And it was glorious because beforehand I'd slathered sunscreen into my forehead and my nose because, as you know, I'm translucent. And if I get a sunburn, I get cadaverous. You know, it gets that much more tan. But I went out there, gray skies. They had the lights on. It was so dark. Mm-hmm. And then this cool gust of wind started blowing because there was a storm coming in, and it was fun. Then the team went inside, got a lot of good work in, and it was a productive day. So what I want to talk about today is the pass rush. Okay. Because we heard from presumably your three leading sack artists for 2024. Now, there could be some surprises. Sure. Or there could be a guy like Derek Barnett who rises up. But at the podium, following Denico Ryans on Wednesday, the Texans trotted out Will Anderson Jr., Denico Autrey, and Danielle Hunter. Three pretty salty defensive linemen. And I want to start with Will Anderson Jr. He got pretty in-depth about what he's worked on this offseason. Somebody said, what were your what did you try to get better at? What did you do? Blah, 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 blah. And he gave this answer.
Pass rush is so many different things, and you really don't know how to put it all in once until you finally get a chance to talk to other pass rushers and Myles Garrett and Danielle, and working on your ankle flexion, working on your hips, all those different things just to loosen you up to be able to be more bendy around the edge, to be able to open up more moves for you. So for me, that was my biggest thing, is working with my ankle mobility, working in my hips, arm strength, grip strength, all those things. So those are areas that I've really been focusing on in this OTA. I've had the privilege to, learn from Danielle and see how he works and try to some of the moves and stuff like that. And they're working because I've learned how to take care of my body and how to do those things to help me turn the corner, how to help me get off blocks, how to help me escape, how to use a long arm and things like that.
Which is pretty detailed, John. That's pretty cool stuff to hear from number 51. I'm excited because you've got Autry in there, and we're going to get to Autry in just a moment. You've got Danielle Hunter, who is an absolute force to be reckoned with and has been so for a long time now in the NFL. But when you hear Anderson describe in such detail some of that stuff, he's talking about ankle flexion. Yep. It's got to get you pretty excited because he was a monster last year. He was Defensive Rookie of the Year, and you presume he's going to get better. And then you factor in what you just heard or saw there with Anderson describing all those things. I'm pretty pumped. Are you pumped? I'm pumped.
Yeah, I think about a lot of times try and relate, and it's hard to, but you just try and relate your first year doing any kind of job. Mm-hmm. And you're flying by the seat of your pants, and you're just trying to stay one day ahead of everything else. I use my teaching analogy all the time. When I was teaching calculus, I stayed one day ahead of my class the entire time. That was it. Until I got through the year, and then I got done with the year and looked back and said, okay, now I've kind of got this down a little bit. Now I can be a little more focused on this area. I can be a little bit better with this. And you start to then focus on those and make those part of your repertoire, and away you go. I think last year Will was just firing. I think Matt Burke put it best. Last year, Will Anderson was just throwing fastballs. He's just throwing fastballs. Fastballs. Now his fastball is 98, 99. It's a good fastball. It was a great fastball. I think as the year wore on, you could see him try and change speeds a little bit. But it was kind of a two-pitch repertoire, if you will. And it was good enough because Will is that talented. He's that relentless to the quarterback. Him talking about those other little things, that's like a pitcher adding a third pitch.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like you say, the fastball is nice, but
right.
Why don't you add in a circle change
and throwing
a sweeper,
12-6, whatever you got,
and a curve. Yep.
And you got 3 pitches now that you can beat people with, and now you're thinking more technically about, okay, this is where I want to spot this pitch. I'm really good at throwing this pitch now. I want to put it here. So I think about that in kind of terms of pitching. He's added a few pitches, trying to add a few pitches. Hear about pitchers all the time. Hey, I'm working on a changeup this down in spring training. I'm working on a changeup. Well, none of those other pitches work if your fastball sucks. If you're throwing an 86-mile-an-hour fastball, you got issues. Will doesn't. Will has got that fastball. Now he's adding to the repertoire. So that's kind of the way that I analyze, make an analogy to baseball in that sense. Because a lot of people understand baseball. So it's like, just think about pitchers adding pitches. I think that's what Will's talking about. And it's very, very technical. You think about pitchers and, where the elbow has to be, where the hand has to be, where the grip is, where you want to grip it, just the wrist, the torque, all that kind of stuff. Those are all things Will's talking about, but it's just in a football sense.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how you can think about it in a baseball sense. That's exactly what Will is doing. When you've been around like a guy like Danielle Hunter and you've been able to work on that changeup, and, in some cases you might be able to throw a couple different types of changeups. Maybe you throw a circle change. Maybe there's a different kind of four-seamer that you like to throw. Those are the things Danielle Hunter's done, and he's mastered those.
Yeah. And let me interject here. So Anderson's around Hunter and picking his brain and all that stuff and learning from him. He also spent a lot of time with Myles Garrett.
That's right.
This offseason working out with Myles Garrett. Maybe the best pass rusher in the league right now. Maybe not. You can argue, but there's strong arguments either way on that one. So my point is, he is surrounding himself mentally with ways to get better and hopefully putting that into action. Okay, go back.
Yeah, and to that point, Myles Garrett, Myles might be the freakiest dude in the NFL. I mean, he's 6'6", 6'7", 265, and he runs like Tank Dell. I mean, he's as fast. I think he ran in the 4.4, 4.5 range. I mean, he could fly. I've almost gotten hit by him running full speed. It was after the A&M Arizona State Texas kickoff game that we had here. I happened to be on the field. I was doing some Texag stuff. I turned around, and all of a sudden he was flying by me to get away from the reporters, and he almost hit me. And I thought, man, God, how do you play against a dude like that? But here's the thing about Myles, and
did he if he'd have hit you, would it have been as hard as he hit Mike Bercovici that day?
Yeah, probably.
Did he hit Mike Bercovici?
Yeah, he hit Mike Bercovici a lot in that game. But I think the one thing about Myles, and I've heard him mic'd up, I've heard him talk and speak about pass rushing. He's very astute, very smart about how he goes about his rushes and what he's trying to do. He has a plan every single time he fires off the ball. When you watch a game, you don't think, okay, this guy's just firing off the ball as fast as he can. He doesn't really have a plan. These guys have plans. The great ones do. The great ones have a plan for how they're going to attack and set up a tackle. I think Will's kind of in the process of learning how to do all of that. He did it at the college level, but now he's taking all the information he gathered as a rookie, and now he's just storing it, saying, okay, against this guy I can do this. Against these kind of guys I can do that. And I think he's kind of storing that. And then he's also trying to pick the brain of those guys. Hey, this is the kind of guy that gave me some issue last year. What do I need to do? What's the best way to go about this? What do my feet need to be? We talk about the hands all the time, but where the feet need to be. And that was one thing that Danielle Hunter talked about was, connecting your hands and your feet on your rush. And I thought that was very astute coming from Danielle Hunter. So I think Will has got kind of the best of all worlds. And Will also knows in certain cases that he can fire off the ball and just long arm or bull rush a tackle, and he's probably going to get somewhere near the quarterback because that's just the kind of power and leverage that he plays with. And my God, I'm so glad that Will Anderson Jr. is a Texan.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing that really intrigued me was Denico. I'm intrigued by what he's going to mean to this defense this year on the whole, Denico Autrey, because he can play a variety of spots on the defensive line very, very effectively at a very high level, and he causes problems. And it's fun hearing from D'Amico Ryans today about what other people around the league think of Denico Autrey, and D'Amico said this:
one of the toughest and most respected players across the league. Like, you talk to any offensive lineman that's went against him, he has their utmost respect. So, and you see the way he plays, he plays the game the right way. He plays hard. He plays with the intensity that's unmatched, and he still finds a way to get in the backfield, moving around, playing multiple spots, whether it's at the interior or on the edge. He's just a tough, hard-nosed football player that's unbreakable.
But then when Denico Autrey spoke, that guy doesn't mess around. That guy hits the hole, does his job, and gets out of there. He's not going to pontificate. He's not long-winded. He's very matter of fact. He's all business, and it was cool hearing from him today. And it was cool hearing him when he was asked, "Hey, how are you going to do on the inside? How are you going to do on the outside? What are your thoughts on that?" And this is what he had to say there.
They really don't change if you're just getting off and attacking. I mean, I'm just going to attack in every position I'm at, and it should work out for me.
We touched on Denico Autrey a few months ago, right after he signed here, but seeing what you've seen over the last few days, over the last week or so of OTAs, John, how optimistic, how excited are you? We just heard about that excitement with Will Anderson, but what's the excitement level sprinkling in Denico Autrey when you have Anderson and you have Danielle Hunter?
Yeah, it's pretty high. Denico didn't do a ton in the mini camp this week. But look, he's a 10, 11-year vet. As I don't know if the interview got off on a good foot when he corrected somebody about his age. Somebody tried to make him a little bit older. I don't know who it was. Tried to make him a little bit older than he was. He was like 33, not 34. I thought that was a pretty funny moment in his press conference. And Denico doesn't say anything. And I go back. I remember this. I think it was day 2 of free agency. And on day 1, Denico had agreed to sign here with the Texans. And on day 2, Jeffrey Simmons took to X, Twitter, posted, "Oh, no, don't tell me that the Texans got Nico."
Yeah.
And I was like, well, wait, we already got Nico. Oh, he's talking about Denico. Okay, I got it. That's pretty high praise. I mean, that's a guy. Those are two guys.
I feel like there was another teammate or two that were
probably so.
They're like, damn it, what are we doing?
That's the one that
guy go.
Yeah, that's the one that stood out to me with Simmons that I remember. Then there might have been others, but I think that's what Denico has meant to his teams, the Raiders, the Colts, and the Titans. I'm glad that he finally ends his AFC tour here with the best of the lot, being the Houston Texans. And you start thinking about, man, okay, so Mark and I talked about this, at practice a little bit. We talked about players that might not be starters, but you have to have them during the season. And one of those is Derek Barnett. So, okay, let's say you get in a third down and say 12 situation. You can run if you want. You can pick up 9 yards. You have to punt. Third down, 12 situation. You can go back to the throw. And on one end, you got Will, and then inside you got Denico Autrey. You've bumped Derek Barnett inside, and then Danielle Hunter's on the other side. Or you flip-flop some of those guys. But those are the 4 guys. Those are the 4 guys rushing the quarterback at that point when it's 3rd and 12. And, oh, by the way, you're going to bring a 5th guy on a blitz or some sort of pressure or however you're going to put it together. That gets to be really, really fun when you think about it. And Denico Autrey is, when you see him, you're like, man, is that a defensive end? Is that a tackle? No, he's both. He can play both. He's not a permanent tackle. He's not a permanent end, but he's a guy with that inside-outside flex that the scouts and NFL teams are always looking for. Hey, man, can we get a guy that plays 2 or 3 different positions all in one guy? I mean, Denico Autrey is that. And last year, I know he's double-digit sacks. It might have been his best sack year. And he had a couple of those against the Texans. But he's always done that against the Texans. So now hopefully he's doing it for the Texans. But, Drew, I'm thrilled when I see him just on the field with the rest of the defensive line. And at one point, I saw the defensive line walk by me, and there was Heinisch, there was Barnett, and in front of them, Danielle and Will. And so the 4 of them were kind of having a conversation as they were walking together from one drill to the next. I'm like, man, that group on the defensive line is so different from what was here just a couple of years ago. Yeah. What was here even last year. And look, there are going to be some question marks about it. Obviously, can everybody stay healthy? And that's always an issue. There's no doubt about that. But, are the interior guys going to step up? Is Fulurunzo Fadikasi, is he going to be able to step up into that role? Tim Settle, who's a lot bigger than I expected, by the way. I don't know why I had this image of Tim Settle being like 305-ish. Tim Settle's like 320.
I didn't get a chance to listen, and I apologize. It's on me. But did you and Mark get to talk about his rapping?
Who? Tim Settle?
And yeah, he's got a Spotify channel.
Okay, so Tim Settle was one of the guys. Mark and I talked about this. We had a backlog of people waiting for our interview.
Right.
You know, we only got like 6 minutes with him.
Yeah.
We could have gone a million directions. I barely got a Virginia Tech question to him about Enter Sandman, so I didn't even get to the music part at all. But
he played, and he had a high school teammate that they went to Virginia Tech together, and then they both played for the Commanders together for a few years. Like he played with this dude, I think going on 9, 10, 11 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's got a lot of, like you say, a lot of fun side stories, Tim Settle.
Yeah. And I think he's going to end up being a much bigger cog in this, figuratively and literally, for this particular defense. But when it just pertains to the pass rushers. And here's the thing. Last year at this time, Drew, you know, we talk about Derek Barnett now. Derek Barnett was not even a glint in our eye. But he was one of those guys that Nick Caserio claimed off of waivers, brought him here, re-signed him for this year, and you know what he brings to the table.
Yep.
And I think in situations like Denico Autrey, Derek Barnett, 20 to 25 snaps, 20 to 25 specialty rush snaps, pass rush snaps, like Jerry Hughes. When Jerry Hughes was at his best, that's what you were giving him. Now, obviously, with some injuries, Jerry had to play a little bit more last year, but that's really what I think you want from these guys, that you get these 20 to 25 snaps per game where you're just rushing the quarterback. Just be fresh, to give some backup reps to Will and Danielle, and to go out there and then rush the quarterback like your life depends on it. And I think this group is as good a four you could put together. You may not play all four of them together because you might want to have an inside presence just in case there is a run, all that kind of stuff. But Autry can play inside. Man, even, Denico mentioned the other day, I think Matt Burke mentioned it, Danielle Hunter can play inside a little bit if you need him to go win some pass rushes. You want them to be on the outside, but if you have just a little bit of flexibility with those guys, Will Anderson could go inside. There's so many different ways that you could put this together. That's where I'm most curious how Matt Burke and Denico Ryans will deploy them. And we'll find out week 1 against the Colts. You're going to go against a quarterback that can move, that can run, that can do some things. You're going to need a lot of defensive end presence out on the field, and they're going to have to get really creative for that game. And I love it. It's going to be really fun to see.
Okay, let's wrap with this.
Okay.
A name that we heard so much when the defensive guys talked on Wednesday and when the offensive guys talked on Tuesday. We heard Aziz Al-Shaair from everybody, from CJ Stroud, from Denico Ryans, from the other defensive guys, again and again and again. This guy wasted very little time in becoming a leader here. I mean, CJ called him the quarterback of the defense. I'm excited about what we're looking at middle linebacker here, at the inside linebacker spot, the kind of quarterback linebacker spot for this team, the green dot, whatever you want to call it. What's the upgrade there with Aziz Al-Shaair? How good can he be in terms of the best inside guys we've ever seen play for this franchise? Denico Ryans probably being, he and Cushing being tip top of the order there as far as the inside linebacker, middle linebacker spot.
I mean, when I think of Aziz, I think of him playing the game like Denico, like his style.
And I know
like
Cushing
Denico.
Was not a middle linebacker.
Right.
I know it was Denico.
Aziz is so incredibly smart. So first play a team on Tuesday, they run a toss play to Joe Mixon, and the play starts to the left, and you're kind of watching the blocks develop, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, just shooting in between tackle, tight end gap, wherever there was an open gap, you see Aziz Al-Shaair just blowing into the backfield and just tagging off on Joe Mixon. And when I saw it, it was like, ooh, boy, that was quick. And then I realized it's Aziz. And then I think, man, you know what? I've been watching that guy do that since he was at FAU. And I remember early in his last year at FAU, when Devin Singletary was still there, I'm watching Aziz, and I'm like, man, this guy can play. This guy is a player. Then he ends up with San Francisco, where he, learns from Denico and finally gets his opportunity once he goes out as a free agent. He goes to Tennessee, and then we get to see him up close and personal. And, one thing that we found out before that game, the Oiler jersey game, as I don't know, there'll probably be a name for it, but the Oiler jersey game, Aziz had been sick all week.
Day of shame.
Yeah, day of shame. Wear it, suckers. Aziz had been sick that whole week. In fact, they had the flu running through that building, apparently. And Aziz had been sick that entire week. And he goes out there, and I remember thinking, I told Mark, I was like, okay, good. Because if there's anybody that I don't want on the field, it's Aziz. Well, That dude was out on the field.
He registered 74 tackles.
It felt like
game.
it, Drew. I mean, it felt like he was all over the place in that game, and he played with an energy that, okay, that guy was sick. Really? Holy cow. He was so impressive to see live. And I'd seen him before. I had seen him so many times. In that game, he had 13 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, and a quarterback hit. And he's playing with basically the flu.
You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of week 2 or 3 the year before when the Texans went to Chicago. And we'd heard all week that Roquan Smith basically had like a broken leg. And And then he has 15 tackles and he picks off the pass deep in your territory to set up the game winner. You know, the game was on the line and he showed up.
Yeah. He, I mean,
made the play of the game.
You're exactly right. I mean, it's very, very similar. I mean, obviously, man, I think Roquan, he and Fred Warner are the 2 best linebackers in the league. Aziz Al-Shaair.
Yeah,
I know.
I
know. But Aziz plays with the spirit of those guys.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm glad you brought him up. Yeah, in that game, he had 75 defensive snaps, 4 special team snaps. He played 79 snaps. He missed just 2 snaps in that game against us, playing with the flu, and played his guts out and nearly, dragged that team to a win. And then when they played us here, they were beat up. I mean, just mentally, physically, they were beat up. And CJ returned and just gave it to him. But I'm so glad that he's a part of this because he knows this defense. He knows Denico. He knows what Denico wants. And he's a leader. That's one thing Will Anderson talked about.
Yeah.
The leadership that comes from Aziz, that comes from these linebackers, Aziz and Christian Harris. Will told a funny story about how Christian Harris was, kind of getting on him about, staying on side and doing things right. And, Will was mad at himself. And there's Christian Harris kind of saying, hey, man, let's go. Get it together. Quit being depressed. Let's go. And Will just was like, okay, I got guys that are going to challenge me. He doesn't have to be that guy all the time.
Yeah.
It can be his teammates. And I know Aziz will give that. Christian Harris, the guys in the defensive backfield that can do that. So, it was a good mini camp. I thought some guys really showed out well. I thought there was a rookie that really stepped to the forefront, and there was some question about him when he was drafted by some people that really hadn't watched him and didn't believe me because I'd watched him numerous times. Kamari Lassiter. If that guy takes goes to training camp, it takes the next step from where he was in OTAs, minicamp, etc. That dude's going to be an absolute baller.
I interviewed
trust
him
on that
2 days ago during the media days.
Yeah.
And that dude doesn't lack confidence.
So
he talked about
good reason, man.
Yeah, he talked about showing up at Georgia, and the question I think I asked him was, when did you know? Because I'd asked him about it in high school. When did you know you could play in college? And then when you were in college, when did you know that you could play in the NFL? And he said, probably the first day that I practiced there, because I was on the field with a bunch of guys who I knew were going to the NFL.
Yeah.
If I could be on the practice field with them at the same time, why couldn't I go too?
Yeah.
And he was not saying it with braggadocio. He was not saying
being honest
with cockiness. He was just like, okay, they're all going to the NFL, so I should be too.
Yeah.
And it was pretty cool. It was a good conversation to have. It was tough to see him. He had his hair like all the way down to here.
Yeah.
So he was kind of peering out. It was really, I bet it looks really cool on camera, the way it was lit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm looking forward to that, man. I've gotten to where I just love watching that guy play. I loved him at Georgia. I was really happy when I heard the name on draft night. I was kind of like, oh yeah, Kamari Lassiter, because his name had not been, we've been talking about Kool-Aid McKinstry and Cooper DeJean and a few others.
People had him mocked to the Texans. Out of all the mock drafts.
I was very happy. If those guys, if you would have said, hey, you're gonna get Kamari Lassiter at 42, whatever that number ended up being for us, I'd have been like, hell yeah, let's do it. Let's go. And it turned out to and hopefully it will continue to go in that particular direction.
That's awesome. All right, John, it's always wonderful to be with you.
Yeah, man.
And hey, for you listening or watching out there, we appreciate that. We do. And make sure you're checking us out on iTunes. If you're the auditory type, make sure you're following us on iTunes. And if you're more of a visual person, we know who you are. YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Houston Texans YouTube channel, and get this all the time. For John, I'm Drew. So long till next week.